one day at a time.
It's that real this time around. Lock and load.
Get on your knees.
This is the point of no return. I can never go back. Life without parole, upstate, shackled and trapped. Living in the hole, looking at the world through a crack. That I'd rather shoot it out and get clapped. I've gone too far, there ain't no coming back for me. Auschwitz gas chamber full of Zyklon B.
Welcome to Orwellian Optics, the podcast that clarifies modern finance through a macro lens. Brought to you by Alio Capital. We're here to break down how macroeconomics, policy, and political power impact your personal finances and your family's future. Experts agree geopolitics is the biggest risk to your portfolio. We're on a mission to cut through the noise, challenge conventional wisdom of investing, and arm you with the insights you need to stay ahead of the game. Together, let's dissect these critical topics and reclaim control of your freedom and financial future.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Orwellian Optics. I'm Emil Sadovsky and I'm here with Gene Epstein. Gene is an economist and author and has worked as a senior economist for the New York Stock Exchange. He now runs a monthly debate series called the Soho Forum. Welcome, Gene.
Thanks for having me. I guess I should also add that most of my career, I was for 26 years, an economics columnist and a books editor at Barron's Financial Weekly, part of Dow Jones, which then became part of News Corp, a sister publication to the Wall Street Journal. So that's really where that's where I left in early 2018. I started the Debate Society, the Soho Forum, in September of 2016, and we've been doing monthly debates ever since.
And so what sort of drove you to create a debate forum and make that your focus for the last decade?
Well, I've always been somebody of a contentious nature, you might say. And I felt that the debates that were popular needed some improvement on several levels. One is that most of the debates tended to be 2 against 2. And I think that rarely works for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think it rarely works because each person within the limited time allotted doesn't get a whole lot of time to elaborate on his or her views. Secondly, the two are rarely coordinated. The 2 against 2 are rarely coordinated. And so I was noticing that the master of ceremonies, for example, John Donvan and what used to be called Intelligence Squared, sort of took over and dominated. And so I felt strongly that a 1 versus 1 debate, where each side gets plenty of time to present his or her case, 15 minutes right now to make the initial case, which is really a short speech, would work much better. Each side would recognize he or she is responsible for his side of the debate. I think the 2 against 2 just goes off in so many different directions. I also thought that especially bothered by the way the resolutions or the questions were formulated. The debates about capitalism, of which there have been a number, generally speaking, put capitalism on trial and just ask, is capitalism a workable economic system, or how do we evaluate capitalism, pro and con? And I think that's intellectually vacuous, and it's been done over and over again because the socialist side then gets to compare capitalism with some kind of vague ideal rather than with the only available alternative known to man, which would be some form of socialism. So I was getting especially annoyed by the way in which debates were being carried on in that way. And I myself have done 3 debates in which the formulation, the resolution is always socialism is superior to capitalism as a way of achieving prosperity and freedom for the masses. In other words, right up front, you have to define capitalism and then define socialism. But I would sit there appalled that they would define capitalism and then you have socialists and nobody defines social. So all you do is you attack capitalism, and obviously any existing system, no matter how well it works, is going to be filled with imperfections. So the other side is invariably going to score points. So I was amazed at the stupidity of this practice by an organization that used to be called Intelligence Squared, as P.J. O'Rourke once joked, the late great P.J. O'Rourke once joked, sometimes it sounds like intelligence square root. So that especially annoyed me. And I've done 3 debates of socialism, as I've said, and one of them has exceeded 8 million YouTube views. That was with Marxist professor Richard Wolff. So I'm very happy that his celebrity has put us out there, because the other 2 debates I did with fairly well-known socialists, Vasquez and Cara and Ben Burgess, have gotten a little over 100,000 views. So I felt that very strongly. Also, I'm a theater guy. I was a high school actor and college actor. I love theater, and I wanted all my debates to be done in front of a live audience. Rather than, and look, it's not as though I don't listen to debates that are done over Zoom, that are done remotely, but I think that the live audience makes a huge difference. It's a theatrical occasion. I wanted the debate as well to be subject to Oxford-style voting, where you vote yes, no, or undecided on the resolution as a baseline, and then the same audience votes yes, no, or undecided on the resolution after the debate ends, so that you have a sort of quote-unquote winner, just to give the evening some kind of conclusion. So those are the principal reasons why I wanted to do it my way, and I'm gratified that it's done quite well. During COVID, I had to go online, do some Zoom debates. I did 11 Zoom debates, but as soon as I was able to go back to an open live venue, I did so. Now that obviously shipping debaters in to our arena in downtown New York costs money. We do charge $24 a ticket, $12 for students. We do depend on donations. So it's a bit of a hassle to make it into that kind of a theatrical occasion. I also, for me, it's very important to have a twofold mission to help build a community. Afterwards, we have a party at my loft apartment 2 blocks up down from the venue that my wife caters. I think they get to talk to the debaters who usually attend and get to meet each other, and the parties go on for a few hours. So I wanted that to be an important part of the debate as well. And all of those things, I think, have worked out pretty well. That's why I thought that it was an important for me to have that kind of a need as a moderator of debates. I myself have done 12 debates, and I know that it's very stressful, especially if you're the only person up there and you're being judged by the audience. And so I get a lot of turndowns, especially from progressives who don't want their views exposed. But sometimes I have to bribe them to come. I overpay them often. Our base rate is $2,500. They say no, and then I say, what if I paid you $10,000? Then they say yes. Amazingly enough, somehow or other, they're willing to debate if you offer them a little extra money. In fact, a lot of extra money. My progressives actually make more money from debating at the Solar Forum than the libertarians do, because that's difficult to get to lure.
It seems like at the Soho Forum you could probably make a scale of the strength of people's convictions about their ideas based on how much you have to pay them to get on stage.
Oh, strength of their conviction. Well, it's really fear. Oh, come on. No, it's really just that. um, Who's the guy? I shouldn't mention any names, but it's just that they've written books, they've been out there, they give softball, they get softball interviews, but they don't want to be humiliated on a stage and be and if you were baloney, you wouldn't want to get caught in the meat grinder. So really, it's reputational. That's their problem. But if you offer them enough money, then maybe they'll say yes and take a chance. So I don't know if it's the strength of their convictions. It's just that again, our debates uh, go out on video and podcast. That all of them are available at thesoulforum.org. We've done over 100, and so it's a lot of exposure. Your ideas are put to the test, and a lot of people are fearful of getting their ideas put to the test by somebody who might strongly disagree with them.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is you've written about econospinning, which is, I think, you sort of the sort of your idea of how the media uses economic data to distort reality on the ground. That's one of our kind of main themes here on Orwellian Optics, is looking at how data and media perspectives can be used to really distort the reality of what's actually happening. Can you sort of unpack the idea of econospinning and your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, I wrote the book published the book in 2006. And at the time, there was no way to write such a book without devoting the first several chapters to Paul Krugman, and which I had to do because he got almost everything wrong. I mean, it was amazing. It was really just predictable that if he was a Democratic administration, he'd definitely interpret the data, generally interpret the data in a positive way. If it was a Republican administration, he would interpret the data in a negative way. And so since he was sort of the dominant player, the first economist to have a column in the New York Times, then I felt that I could have written the whole book from him. I mean, the one thing I think one of his problems about how ignorant he was that the government websites have some good data, have some data that's not so good, and their explanations that they publish are sometimes clear, often not, and you have to know, as I did as a columnist, to call them up. Often they have a lot of time on their hands. Call them up and get an explanation and get them to talk candidly about how the data were put together and what's there. And so I think that Krugman was probably capable of doing that. As you may know, he was sort of forced out after being at the New York Times for 25 years. I know now he has a Substack, although he gets a lot less exposure than he used to. And I think that's been a good thing. I don't know what happened to the New York Times, but they suddenly began to give him a lot of grief. When he said he was retiring, he then wrote a column in which he complained about how he was getting far too much meddling in his column by the editors, far too much heavy-duty editing of his work, and so he had to withdraw. I never would have hired him in the first place. Just a couple of the columns, but I'm glad that at least after 25 years, they finally drove him out. And so he was one of my main targets. Yeah.
Where do you think Krugman went wrong the most?
Was wrong about the most? Well, as a matter of fact, he was really just historical, and this maybe inside baseball, but the relatively low unemployment rate under George W. Bush was something he kept inveighing against. I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this, by pointing out that the long-term unemployment rate was actually higher than it used to be. And the one thing that he didn't know, a technical and interesting matter, is that the labor force commitment of women had dramatically changed. And so I can explain this carefully. What it means is that if you're not very committed to the labor force and you're out of a job, you often just drop out of the labor force. But if you have a career commitment to the labor force, then you remain unemployed and you spend a while longer than the average looking for a job. And so, what was showing up was that the long-term unemployment rate, those who were unemployed for more than 15 weeks, was higher than it used to be. So he kept harping on that. And the one thing he didn't realize was that it was all because there was a revolution in the labor force participation rate of women. And women's commitment. But if you then just separated out the long-term unemployment rate of men, you find that was relatively normal. But the women were making a huge difference, and therefore it was actually a good sign, so to speak, that women were more committed to the labor force. So that was something that he wouldn't shut up about, that the low unemployment rate on the part of the George W. Bush administration was a hoax. I should add that, however, that the Wall Street Journal editorial page was also, I'm trying to remember what they were doing in order to make the numbers under George W. Bush look better than they really were. And now I'm forgetting because I wrote the book in 2006. But the reason I mentioned that is because I was accused of being some sort of right-wing Republican, going after the Krugman and going after what he was saying about George W. Bush. But I did go after I devoted a whole chapter called Bush League Economics, devoted to attacking the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. And they were just literally right upstairs from me at News Corp, where we'd been acquired by Rupert Murdoch. So I was attacking my own sister publication, the Wall Street Journal. I kept pointing out that they might have been offended. Nobody went after me, but I kept pointing out that, no, I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I'm just a libertarian. I try to report the numbers accurately. Now, I should point out, just to update the story, that the numbers have become increasingly problematic. Post-COVID, the reporting back to the Bureau of Labor Statistics has declined, but obviously the most recent event, which is that Donald Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics for delivering employment data that he felt were distorted and that he didn't like. My lesson to people as well is to believe in what I call statistical redundancy, meaning that that all of the numbers are essentially out of focus snapshots, and you want to lay as many end to end in order to get some idea of what is happening. So I recently published a tweet in which I cited the ADP numbers, automatic data processing, publishes monthly numbers based upon the payrolls that they service on private sector employment. And I showed that the ADP numbers are also showing a marked slowdown in the growth of new jobs. So therefore, I pointed out that there was verification from this independent source that the BLS reporting about a fall off in the growth of jobs has been confirmed by this independent source. And so my main lesson is that you've got to do a lot of work and pull together all the semi-reliable sources in order to get a picture of what's happening. We also had an independent report from what's called Institute for Supply Management that came out for services recently, just today, in fact, and for manufacturing, which also shows weakening. And so all of the numbers are definitely showing that the economy is definitely weakening. whether that means that we're necessarily going to fall into an outright contraction, I think is up for grabs. I've been a little bit humbled by the surprise that the economy has been stumbling along. Maybe the final point I should make is that I'm a kind of a maverick in this sense. I hang out with a lot of free market libertarians, and I admire a lot of them, like David Stockman, who was former Treasury Secretary under Reagan, and who publishes some fiery stuff. I appeared with him on the Tom Woods show, and we were supposed to talk about what our outlook for the economy is. And I rather shocked Tom Woods, and I guess shocked David Stockman, by telling him, David, I wish you would stop forecasting every year that the economy is about to collapse. You've turned into a stop clock. You're giving us free market people a bad reputation. He denied that he did this, but I cited a most recent case in which he did do it. And what am I saying? I'm saying that as someone who wants to abolish the Federal Reserve, as someone who believes that the U.S. government and its debt are on a long-term collision course, as someone who hears most of the views that you can hear from free market economists about the problems the government creates, I do think that I do think that there's more vibrancy, more of a market economy, and more vibrancy to American capitalism than my free market colleagues give it credit for. I do have a little bit more respect for the official numbers than they have, and so that makes me a little bit of a sort of forbidden fruit for them, because they seem to revel in forecasting that everything is going to hell because the government is screwing everything up. And I don't quite believe that. As I say, I'm sort of a middle of the roader. I do believe that the government numbers are of some value. And I was on a podcast in 2022, and I was surprised at how aggressively Federal Reserve Chairman Powell was hiking the interest rate in order to stop the price inflation that he himself had caused. I mean, and I think that's an important thing to note, that the disastrous lockdowns of 2020 would not have been possible had the Federal Reserve not loaded up on about $4 trillion worth of debt. That's called monetizing the debt. The U.S. government incurred a debt of nearly $6 trillion in 2020 and 2021, and in order to lock down the economy because no revenue was coming in, and they sold most of it to the Federal Reserve, which bought it with printed money. And so had the Federal Reserve not been there, I don't think they could have gotten away with selling $6 trillion worth of debt to the market. But that's what Chairman Powell did. And it was easy enough to predict that with that explosion and the money supply was created by the acquisition of that debt, that price inflation was going to happen. But then I was surprised at how Powell aggressively turned around and hiked the interest rate so quickly and rapidly. That motivated me in 2022 to tell a podcast interviewer who was very free market that it's almost a certainty that we're going to have a recession in 2023. The only question is, will it be mild or will it be as bad as 2008 and 2009? He responded by telling me I was crazy. It's going to be the mother of all recession. Well, we were both wrong. The economy muddled through in 2023, which surprised me. So I've been a little bit chastened by my own track record, although I think this time the risks for recession are very great.
Yeah, the huge print off of money during 2021 and 2022. I mean, everybody sort of looked at that and thought, oh, well, that'll be a ton of inflation, and we'll probably have a recession as we try to rebalance, right? Where do you give credit for there being no real recession, the economy, as you say, muddling through, and sort of, I mean, we've continued to build up a lot of debt in the meantime, but yeah, how do you see that?
Well, listen, see, this is the point I'm making it out because I find that while uh, I believe in what's called ABCD, Austrian business cycle theory, I believe that the root cause of recession is really the way in which the Federal Reserve pumps up the money supply and then puts on the brakes. Um, the answer is that it doesn't always happen, and the answer is I don't know. I find it rather surprising. I would have thought there'd be a fair amount of malinvestment accumulating. Now, there are a lot of folks who, free market friends, who are responding and said, "Oh, I'm just believing the official numbers. I'm just I'm gullible." And really, there was a recession in 2003. I'll tell you one other number I look at. Uh, New unemployment insurance claims. And new unemployment insurance claims are actually, do not come from a sample. They come from reporting from all 50 states, and about 98% of businesses are registered with unemployment insurance. And so, that's a kind of almost a universal count of the average number of new unemployment insurance claims. And I threw up a chart showing that any time a recession happens, there's only every time, without exception, of these recessions as conventionally defined by the official business cycle dating committee. Every time there's been a recession, there's always been a very noticeable spike in new unemployment insurance claims. So I released this showing that there was no spike in 2023 or 24. And so, in fact, I got one of my free market colleagues to gracefully throw in the towel and agree that if this universal count was showing no spiking in new unemployment insurance claims, and this you always get it when there's a recession, probably there was no real recession. There was probably some kind of economic growth, however weak, but definitely there in 2003 and 2004. And obviously, I'm just going to return to the answer to your question, which is that I was surprised. I was surprised that Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, was being so aggressive in hiking the interest rate, and that the economy clearly did show some growth. And in fact, I would also say that wages and salaries caught up with inflation by 2023 and 2024. They were running. Most people were being paid for full-time work or for hourly work a rate of pay that was exceeding the cumulative rate of inflation. So most people were a bit better off. Now, of course, I hasten to add that the housing situation is not good. So there's an exception there.
The CPI basket of goods change has the CPI basket of goods has sort of changed. What people spend their money on has also changed. So the better off question can be kind of hard to quantify there. I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in about what you're saying is that, uncoupling the sort of reality from some of these metrics is very difficult, right? You have things like, okay, you have the unemployment rate, the official one, you have the labor force participation rate, and then you brought up earlier, the ADP jobs numbers, which have been kind of popular. I've read a lot about the, ADP statistics being reported recently. I have a small business. We used ADP for a few months until two different accountants told us that ADP is only for large businesses. So there's sort of systematic bias in all of these metrics, right?
Okay, let me back up. Okay, a few things. No one. All I've said is that Yeah, please. All I wanted to show was that I showed the ADP trend for the past few years, and I showed that its monthly numbers were recently showing a marked slowdown. So all I said was that whatever bias they had, the fact that they too were showing a marked slowdown over the last several months tended to confirm the marked slowdown of the Bureau of Labor Statistics was finding. Just that trend. That's all I said. I didn't square by it in terms of levels. So that's all I claimed.
No, and I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to say that you claimed anything more.
Well, that's okay. Look, give me all the pushback you want. I also want to mention to you that this is my worst sin. I'm going to stun the hell out of you by telling you that I believe that the conventional consumer price index somewhat overstates price inflation. Quite the reverse from what my colleagues, American colleagues believe. And I mean, some of the more extremists, if they actually think that we can suffer in something like 6% price inflation rather than like 2%, which we had, up to 2019, or even less than 2%, then really we haven't had any economic growth at all for years because the nominal GDP are less than 6%. But in fact, I think that if you actually explore how oddly, it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics that tracks consumer price inflation, you'll find that they have real difficulty giving credit to innovation. You'll find that they do for example, they do lots of odd things that are rather bureaucratic but miss out on discounting. That they actually cannot quite keep up with the entrepreneurial economy, but more particularly just in a garden variety way. I don't know if very few people know that when Amazon and Walmart came on the scene, Walmart in particular, cut prices substantially for groceries, and others had to follow suit. And now Walmart, by the way, is the dominant grocery retailer. When those price cuts happened, the formula used by the BLS for the CPI did not capture that event. Missed it because of the way they link in the numbers. So that's just one typical example. When the smartphone came along, and suddenly it's performing. Suddenly you don't need a camera, you don't need a watch, They had real difficulty incorporating that, and they really understated its the disinflationary effects of the smartphone. So I'm just giving it. And then Amazon came on the scene, and now and suddenly books were a lot cheaper. A lot of suddenly you can buy a book on Kindle. As you said, things are changing all the time. Real difficulty tracking that kind of discounting as well. And so therefore, I do agree with those, and because I, by the way, speak still to this day to people who are fairly close to the scene, who know the numbers, and who have been employed tracking the numbers. And they convinced me, one critic in particular, there was a Brookings Institution study done, and I spoke to the guy who was a veteran of that agency, who explained to me why the CPI still overstates inflation, and I think he had a pretty convincing case. In other words, I'm talking to the experts who are close to the scene. And then that I know you would really get me blackballed from the free market club to make any such statement that the government is actually overstating price inflation rather than understanding it.
It goes to an important point that these things are very complicated. And if you just sort of look at the free market scene and say, oh, well, everybody thinks this, you can draw into these statistics quite a lot. And government intentions either way, they might just be when you look at the details of these things, like your argument seems quite reasonable to me, even though I don't pour over these statistical details every day. I think that when you report on things like the unemployment rate and you just sort of drop that number on a news feed, people read that and the interpretation is very far from the kind of complicated truth that you're drawing out here.
Well, yeah, no, indeed, yeah, because I guess uh, it's not as though my book was a major bestseller, and I got people into the weeds too much. I find I actually, because I enjoyed myself tracking the numbers, and I left Barron's in January of 2018, but I still pretty much keep up. I still get a special service called Haver Analytics. They grandfathered me in. They charge a lot of money, but since I was a user for so long at Barron's and promoted them and promote them now, I get access to the numbers. And of course, it's my compulsion to keep tracking them. And but it's not as though my insights are that valuable, because even though I will say that, given what again, as I argued, we basically want to take all of these out of focus snapshots and lay them all on a table and see if we can find any pattern. All signs are pointing to a weakening economy, and yet I've been so chastened by how much I screwed up in 2022. In fact, I could tell you some other forecasting screw-ups if you want to hear them. That I hesitate to argue that we're necessarily going to have a full-fledged contraction of the economy, because my track record is not that good. Of course, I hasten to add that I'm no worse than anybody else, in terms of track record.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is sort of the major theme we like to look at here is that the macroeconomic reality is the product of deep analysis of all of these numbers and sort of just throwing them against the wall and reporting to people, you know, one statistical number doesn't really give them that much benefit. You have to do kind of the deep analysis that you do in your book.
I just want to think that, but then in terms of what you hear people like Tucker Carlson, you've heard of him. He's one of the whole group of people who will literally tell you that the working class, the bottom half of the population, that they're earning no more in real terms than they did 30, 40, 50 years ago. I can tell you that Tucker Carlson is an ignoramus. That clearly all the numbers that you can look at confirm that most people are better off than their parents were, and that almost everybody is doing better than they used to. The only thing that's appalling is that if you look at the bottom fifth of the population, they're getting 4 times more transfer payments it got in 2017 than they did in 1967. There's been a quadrupling of food stamps, a real revolution in the amount of money that they get, so that the actual poverty rate is only a little over 2% once you count all those transfer payments that the bottom fifth is getting. But then the depressing part is that in 1967, 2/3 of the bottom fifth had jobs, and in 2017, that had collapsed to 1/3. They're not in poverty because the transfer payments are immense. But how do you really better yourself unless you have a job? Only 1/3 of them have a job, and there used to be 2/3. So the long-term trends I can tell you about, and I think that in itself is the most stunning statistic. Unfortunately, the old idea that government largesse, if it gets really generous, does tend to cause a disincentive to work in this economy. And I think that's quite tragic. And of course, I do blame government for that. But you wanted to wrap up and shut me up. So let me let you do that. What do you want to know from here? How should we do?
I certainly don't want to shut you up. It's actually been it's a very interesting conversation. I like getting into the weeds on these kind of metrics that, like I said, do just get thrown out there. Unemployment rate, labor force participation, and people don't really uncouple what the actual meaning underneath all of that is for individual people. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and we hope we can have you on again sometime.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You as well. Thanks so much, Gene.
Thanks again for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Be free, think macro, invest smarter by joining the macro revolution with the only investment app powered by Altitude AI. You can join the beta at aliocapital.com. Again, that's aliocapital.com. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a 5-star rating, click like below, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Stay free, and as always, God bless America. This episode has been brought to you by Alio Capital. Get empowered to confidently grow your wealth while strategically managing geopolitical, monetary, and fiscal policy risks. Here at Alio, we combine professional macro investment strategies, personalized portfolio solutions, institutional grade data, and comprehensive wealth tracking into the only AI-powered financial investment app to help you achieve your financial goals independently. Be free, think macro, invest smarter. For more information, download the app now or visit us at aliocapital.com.